How does a political claim, and maybe one that's consistently proven false, how does that morph from just an isolated talking point into, well, a full political strategy,
Yeah.
and then even into a philosophy that actively damages public trust?
That's really the heart of what Jonathan Lemire tackles in The Big Lie. It's an exploration of how election denial rhetoric, especially after the 2020 election, became such a defining, maybe the defining force in recent American politics.
Right. And today we're aiming for something more than just a quick summary. Enjoy a bold new take on book coverage with this extended analysis.
Hmm.
It's more than a summary, though we do include that too. This feature looks closely at how the author, Lemire in this case, shapes his argument, how he builds influence, and crucially how he earns or maybe loses your trust.
The goal is to give you sharper tools for reading, basically. More insight, greater discernment.
Exactly. Should you read this book? This analysis should definitely help you decide. It's also, I think, really useful for aspiring writers too.
Oh, absolutely.
And hey, if you find this expanded format valuable, please let us know. Your feedback really does help shape what we do next.
Okay, so Lemire's subject here. It's incredibly timely, urgent even. He's not just recounting events. He's addressing an unprecedented challenge to democratic norms, right? And those worries about election legitimacy after 2020 and January 6th.
And to really get the weight of that message, we first have to look at the messenger himself, Lemire.
But yes, understanding his credibility, his ethos is step one.
We need to figure out where he's coming from. He's not just some pundit watching from afar. His background, former White House bureau chief at Politico, MSNBC host, a political correspondent covering politics for years, that immediately sets him up as someone who was there.
That's the foundation, isn't it? That level of access. It anchors his whole critique in direct observation, not just speculation or partisan talking points.
So the details come from firsthand experience.
Right. His narrative is full of insider details, direct interviews he gathered while covering both the Trump and Biden presidencies. So when he talks about political strategy, it carries the weight of, actual on-the-ground reporting.
And that insider access feels pretty critical because it speaks to the book's purpose, doesn't it? Lemire isn't just trying to rehash the news cycle. He wants to expose the evolution and the longer-term consequences of this specific strategy. The big lie.
Precisely. And the tone matches that goal. It's urgent, yeah, but also analytical and, cautionary. He's blending that rigorous reporting style with, I'd say, a subtle kind of advocacy for established facts.
Using his journalistic standing to sound an alarm.
Exactly, an alarm about the decay of civility and potentially democratic practices themselves.
Okay, let's pivot then. Let's talk about the logical structure. How does he actually build his argument? The core claim is about the destructive power of the big lie. For that to land, the argument needs to be solid.
And it is. It's very fact-driven, logically consistent. Lemire builds his case using public records, court documents, lots of journalistic documentation. He lays out the sequence meticulously.
Making sure every step is supported.
Right. Avoiding logical leaps or fallacies. He wants to show the destructive nature of the rhetoric through evidence.
Now, he organizes the book chronologically,
Hmm.
tracing things over several years. Why do that? Isn't there a risk? It just feels like, reading yesterday's news again. We all lived through it.
That's a fair point, but the chronology is actually, I think, the key insight here. Lemire uses that timeline to demonstrate something crucial. That the big lie wasn't just some spontaneous outburst after the 2020 loss.
So it predates the election itself.
Yes. By tracing the rhetoric back, sometimes years back, to moments like those hints of a rigged system, even during the 2016 campaign, he shows how the groundwork for denial was laid intentionally, much earlier.
So the structure itself makes the case. It shows the shift from maybe isolated comments to a widespread belief system that actually motivated people to act.
That's it, exactly. His goal isn't just what happened, but how the rhetoric evolved and escalated over time. He contrasts the maybe subtler language used early on with the really overt, relentless falsehoods around 2020 and afterwards. It highlights a deliberate change in tactics.
And his writing style seems to fit that investigative feel.
Yeah.
It's accessible, clear, not much jargon.
Right. He relies a lot on direct quotes, reported speech. It really highlights the escalating dishonesty. In a way, he lets the politicians' own words build the case against their claims.
It's effective. You don't just have to take Lemire's analysis. You see the documented gap between reality and the claims being made.
Mm-hmm. That gap grows wider as you move through the timeline.
This kind of structural discussion is really where combining our different reads helps. And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation, powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis.
Okay, so let's talk about the appeals. Emotional, analytical. How does the book actually connect with the reader? Lemire keeps a very measured, journalistic tone, right? But the subject itself, it's hard not to feel alarmed.
Absolutely, that measured tone is important, I think. It stops it feeling like just sensationalism. But the sheer weight of the evidence he presents about the erosion of institutions, that triggers the emotional response.
Yeah, by showing how these repeated falsehoods created such deep divisions, he can't help but generate concern, maybe even apprehension, about where things are headed for American democracy.
He uses a powerful technique, too. Contrast. Strategic contrast. Again and again, he puts official facts, election results, court rulings right next to the false claims being pushed.
Yes, that juxtaposition is so central to his argument. It really strengthens the critique of how deception became normalized. When you see the verified result right there next to the, frankly, wild claim,
Okay.
it hammers home that this isn't just policy disagreement. It's about creating a separate reality.
He also anchors it with specific references, doesn't he? Highly charged moments.
Yeah. He does. He doesn't just talk vaguely about election denial. He brings up the atmosphere at that 2016 Ohio rally, the immediate shock of the Capitol insurrection, specific quotes from figures like Steve Bannon. It keeps it grounded and relevant.
These act like markers, then. Emotional, historical touch points.
I think so. They provide instant context and remind you of the very real stakes involved. It pushes you, the reader, to reflect on what's been damaged or lost.
And speaking of reflection, we definitely encourage you to check out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel, offering AI book analysis, summaries, critiques, really aiming to inspire reflection and rational thought.
Reflection is key here, because the big lie ultimately isn't just history, it's a warning. So let's get critical. Did Lemire actually achieve his purpose? Did he successfully document the evolution and consequences of this political approach?
I'd say he did, effectively. He makes a really compelling case for the big lie being both a tactic and a kind of foundational philosophy in recent politics. And the way he blends insider access with careful reporting gives it weight without feeling over the top.
Okay, but here's the challenge for any book on such a hot-button recent topic. Resonance. This is where the evaluation gets a bit more complex.
Meaning?
Well, while the book's depth and its warning are definite strengths, the fact that it relies heavily on narratives already widely covered by the media, that might limit how well it connects with people who are already skeptical.
Ah, right. The so what factor for some readers?
Yeah.
It depends heavily on where you're starting from, doesn't it? If you're already worried about institutional stability, the book feels like powerful confirmation, a detailed account of what you feared.
Exactly. But for political opponents, or maybe those deeply distrustful of mainstream journalism already, there's a risk the book gets dismissed as just, another partisan attack, polemical.
Potentially reinforcing the very divisions it's documenting.
It's a tough spot for journalists covering these things, that polarization trap.
And this kind of loops back to Lemire's core assumption, maybe. His whole critique seems built on the idea that the reader shares certain fundamental values.
Like what?
Like believing in the importance of objective truth, professional standards in politics and media, the basic integrity of the democratic process itself.
Right. If a reader fundamentally rejects those shared values, then all the detailed evidence, the author's credentials, they might lose their impact.
Right.
But his strength is still that detailed, first-hand, credentialed perspective. It makes his warnings very hard to just brush off, even for people who disagree with his conclusions. They have to grapple with the fact that this journalist was there, watching it happen.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener, when you encounter complex political writing like this? The lesson isn't just the history Lemire covers, maybe, but also how he builds his case.
Yeah, understanding the author's moves, establishing that insider credibility, the ethos, structuring the narrative chronologically for impact, the logos, using evidence carefully to create that sense of alarm, the pathos.
That's the key, isn't it? To reading any demanding book with more discernment, it gives you the framework to analyze the rhetoric yourself.
Whether you end up agreeing with the book's ultimate conclusions or not, it equips you to think critically.
Definitely. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. And please subscribe, share, consider purchasing via the link, and always think rationally.
And see the many other genre-based book analyses at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.